Lex Luthor, the man who has everything: money, fame, power. He is also ruthless, evil, and feared, which makes him the top villain on Superman's list of foes. No villain is more ruthless or infamous in his desire to destroy the last son of Krypton. Once Metropolis's most prominent citizen, Luthor has used his unmatched genius to conquer the worlds of business, politics, and science to gain power and dominion over the people of Metropolis and, ultimately, Superman himself. Lex Luthor was the son of billionaire mogul Lionel Luthor and his wife Letitia. Ever focused on his business endeavors, Lionel never spent much time with Lex. Consequently, his son found himself drifting along in life, lacking the moral or emotional grounding that comes from strong parenting. For a brief period of time, Lex lived in Smallville. There he associated with Clark Kent, Lana Lang, and Pete Ross. The people of Smallville were generally suspicious of the young Luthor, believing he had not fallen far from the corrupt Luthor tree. However, Lex found a friend in Clark Kent, who reached out to his fellow misfit, although the two eventually had a traumatic falling out. Lex left Smallville under a cloud, and his experience there was so miserable that he repressed it from his memory, and no longer recalls his past relationship with Clark Kent. Clark remembers, however, both the good times and the bad. Following his time in Smallville, Lex set out to become the most accomplished member of his family. When his parents died, Lex forged his own company, LexCorp, a multi-million-dollar operation that stood at the forefront of the scientific development. Lex himself was a brilliant scientist who used his mental assets to create numerous innovative innovations. With the revenue from these, LexCorp became the leading company in Metropolis and soon rivaled other megacorporations throughout the world. The former outsider from Smallville had risen to the top. He lived the dream, a life of wine, women, and power. Nothing could topple him from his position. Nothing, that is, except a superhero. Once Superman arrived in Metropolis, Lex found himself overshadowed as the city's most famous citizen. The people had found a role model who served them with great power and humility. Superman had quickly earned the love and admiration of the people of Metropolis, and Lex felt that he had been robbed. Desperate to regain the undying loyalty of the Metropolis citizens, he initiated several schemes to establish himself as the city's true hero. Superman interfered with all of these ploys, discovering that Lex's public face was utterly bogus, and that he was in fact the source of all evil in Metropolis. Although he couldn't prove anything, Superman vowed he would watch Lex closely, and eventually bring Luthor to justice. Lex welcomed this challenge, confident that he was too good to ever get caught. From that point on, Lex Luthor and Superman were mortal enemies. Although Lex claims not to remember his time in Smallville or his relationship with Clark Kent, Superman keeps it at the forefront of his mind. In spite of their shared history, Lex's actions are so heinous and offensive in Superman's eyes that he must thwart any and all of the mogul's schemes. One of Lex's crowning achievements was his work in cloning. He spearheaded a project that combined his own DNA with that of Superman to create a clone that was the perfect mix of their talents. Lex initially named this clone Lionel after his father, but the name didn't stick. The clone escaped and followed in Superman's footsteps, fighting for truth and justice, as Superman's protege, eventually taking the name Connor Kent. Lex was known as quite the ladies' man. He had illicit affairs with some of the world's most famous women, and was rumoured to have been married more than half a dozen times. though the specific number has never been revealed. For a long time, one target of his affection was Lois Lane. Lois had earned a reputation for herself as a resourceful reporter who had exposed several of Lex's evil schemes. Although Lex hated her for it, he was also secretly in love with her. He deeply admired Lois's initiative and strength, and longed to have her by his side. Then Superman arrived on the scene, and Lois never looked at Lex again. She had only eyes for the Man of Steel. Lex moved forward, continuing his liaisons with many women over the years, while Lois married Clark Kent, much to Lex's disgust. Having conquered Metropolis, Lex eventually set his sights on the entire United States of America. The first step in his nationwide campaign was Gotham City, the home of Bruce Wayne's Wayne Enterprises, LexCorp's chief rival, and, of course, Bruce Wayne's alter ego, Batman. Lex and Bruce had done business many times in the past. They had pooled their corporate resources for the advancement of many positive scientific endeavors. However, neither man trusted the other. There was always a sense of impending betrayal between Lex and Bruce, although it always remained unstated. As Lex began his national expansion, a massive, devastating earthquake hit Gotham City. The American government horribly mismanaged the disaster, leaving Gotham on its own to recover. Lex stepped in and used his resources to rebuild the city. He was rapidly taking over Gotham in the same way he had Metropolis. Luthor was initially seen as a savior by the citizens of Gotham, except by Bruce Wayne. As Batman, Bruce had learned that Lex's construction crews were corrupt and a threat to the city's survival. Lex was even using some of Batman's worst enemies, like the monster Bane, to enforce his new order in Gotham. Lex proceeded undeterred with his rebuilding plans, and eventually Gotham was restored to its former splendor. In the aftermath of the Gotham earthquake, Batman learned that Luthor had manipulated the US government, which had allowed him to become the apparent savior of Gotham. It was all part of Lex's plan to become president. Bruce Wayne cut off all business ties to LexCorp as Lex set out on the campaign trail. Riding a wave of support for the good work he had done in Gotham City, Lex became the strongest candidate for the presidency. He campaigned on a platform advocating great technological advancement for America. Joined by his long-forgotten Smallville classmate Pete Ross as vice presidential candidate, and Pete's wife Lana, it looked like Lex would become the next president of the United States. To further his campaign, Lex stepped down from LexCorp, entrusting his company to Talia al Ghul, the daughter of terrorist leader Raj al Ghul. Lex felt Talia was the best person for the job while he was in the White House. He and Pete won the election, and the dethroned head of Metropolis was inaugurated as president. He maintained his campaign promises to increase technology throughout the country, passing laws and overseeing several upgrades throughout Metropolis and elsewhere. Like that of most presidents, however, Lex's administration faced a crisis that proved to be one of his most defining moments. An alien force led by the evil Imperiex was headed for Earth. Imperiex's forces destroyed Kansas City, killing thousands. As president, Lex coordinated the US military, organizing battalions to fight the alien invaders. Lois Lane's father, General Sam Lane, served as Luthor's Secretary of Defense. He was tragically killed in action during the fighting. As Commander-in-Chief of the American military, Lex also coordinated the Army's efforts with the world's greatest superheroes, including his longtime enemy Superman. Superman led the efforts of nearly every hero on Earth, fighting bravely to beat back Imperiex and his warriors. The heroes saved the planet, but Lex reaped the rewards. He was viewed as the mastermind behind the victory. His poll numbers were higher than any American president's had ever been. He was considered to be the greatest hero for the first time since Superman's arrival. But his triumph hid a dark secret. Lex had known Imperiex's forces were coming long before they arrived. He could have mobilized the Justice League and the army much sooner than he and had allowed Kansas City to be destroyed and many lives to be lost. In fact, Lex's response to the crisis was nothing more than a bid to become a hero, a cold-hearted act of gross egotism. When Superman and Batman learned that Luthor had known about Imperiex and done nothing, they decided to remove him from office. But Lex, still determined to bring down Superman, learned of a giant kryptonite meteor heading for Earth. He used his position as president to make people think that the meteor was a Kryptonian invasion. Superman and Batman stormed the White House, and a dramatic battle ensued, with members of the Justice League trying first to stop Superman and Batman, and thus protect the president, before they learned of Luthor's true role. Armed with a powerful battlesuit, Lex fought back. He was defeated by Superman and Batman, but escaped before he could be brought to justice. Lex then disappeared and was presumed dead, making Pete Ross the President of the United States and Lana Lang his First Lady. Lex's last words before the disappearance warned of a coming crisis. This crisis came at the hands of a parallel universe version of himself, who had teamed up with a pair of alternate universe supermen to correct what they saw as anomalies in the current universe. This alternate universe Lex, named Alexander, took on his other self's appearance, except for having different coloured eyes. He formed a group of supervillains to wreak havoc in an effort to put an end to the superheroes of Earth and usher in his own rule over the planet. The real Lex Luthor would have none of this, however. Already dethroned as the most powerful man in Metropolis and forced to resign as the US President, Lex refused to allow this imposter take over his role as the world's top criminal. Lex put together his own army of villains, called the Secret Six, and went after Alexander. Once Alexander's united villains were defeated and the Joker killed Alexander, Lex returned to his place at the top of the criminal underworld. Sadly, Lex's son, Connor, was killed in action fighting Alexander and the alternate Superman. Lex mourned his passing by placing flowers at a memorial to him that stood in Metropolis near the giant Superman statue. Some good news did come Lex's way. He was acquitted of all charges against him during his time as president, claiming that it was actually Alexander the imposter who had perpetrated the many evil deeds he was accused of. Lex returned to a private laboratory to resume his secret scientific work. He no longer ran his company. Lana Lang now was head of LexCorp, but instead joined with other criminal scientists to research the Everyman Project, the eventual aim of which was to give superpowers to regular people. With the latest technology at his disposal, Lex created chemical compounds that would allow average citizens to gain superpowers. He used these compounds as weapons too. One of Superman's closest allies, Steel, was turned into a literal Man of Steel. When Steel's niece also wanted special abilities, Lex was more than happy to oblige her. She and several other newly gifted individuals formed a hero team called Infinity Incorporated. Unfortunately, the powers proved fatal, and Infinity Inc. turned upon Luthor. Many citizens were returned to normal, and Lex was publicly humiliated. Unsuccessful in his attempts to create an army of superheroes to do his bidding, Lex began to build alliances with other supervillains. He worked with Bizarro for a brief time, trying to get the reverse Superman creature to capture Superman's new protege, Chris Kent. But that plan failed. Luthor had turned his attention to gathering a massive number of supervillains together to form a team called the Injustice League of America. The Injustice League comprised the greatest enemies of truth and justice ever assembled. Joined by the likes of the Joker, Cheetah, and many, many others, Lex declared war on the Justice League of America. The Injustice League got an early upper hand, capturing several heroes, including Superman, and torturing them. The rest of the Justice League succeeded in freeing their colleagues and put an end to the Injustice League once and for all. Lex was captured and sent to the newly created prison planet Salvation Run, where he led one of two rival factions prisoners on the planet, Although he is usually eventually defeated, Lex Luthor has proven to be the most powerful criminal mind of the modern era. He has faced Superman on countless occasions and come close to defeating the Man of Steel many times. His leadership skills have taken him to the very top of the business world, the political realm, and even the underworld. He has forged controversial scientific frontiers and successfully conquered the peak of every mountain he's tried to climb. It's only fitting that the world's greatest superhero, Superman, would be challenged to find a fitting nemesis in the world's greatest supervillain, Lex Luthor.